the statistics on like loneliness and isolation are that the youngest generation is the most lonely, which is a complete reversal of how it's been through all human history. Usually it's the oldest people that are the most isolated because their peer group is sort of like tapering down. They don't understand everything about what's going on anymore. But now we have this swap, and it's like, that has to have repercussions. We still need to solve problems as a society. And if we're not actively practicing that, it's like, it's a little bit like, that's what set us apart as a species. Our ability to solve problems. We don't always have the answer, but like, you know, we kind of muddle through by some of this, you know, just talking about it. And it's really in my opinion, like one of the only things where you're like, one of the only ways we have to really solve things.
We have a loneliness epidemic in the United States. The Surgeon General said that lonely is worse than smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day for your health. Like,
I believe it.
Dire. Like, this is serious. And I don't think people are taking it seriously enough. I know we have an obesity epidemic. I know we have lots of things going on in the world, but this seems like something that we can solve.
It's something that should be easy to solve, but it's also very similar to obesity in that in some ways it's a crisis of abundance. And it's abundance of things that aren't necessarily always good for us, right? Like, it's like we don't know how to stop. We don't know how, and when we have a lot of resources, we actually don't, in a lot of ways, we don't need each other as much.
Yeah.
So those are the things that usually bind us to each other. So, you know, I do think that it might take some challenging events for people to realize that how much they value it. It's sort of a broader trend of thinking about like loneliness and connection and like, what is a family anymore? And just all these sort of notions of, sort of thinking about ourselves in relationship to other people and sort of like, what does community mean and what really makes us feel happy and fulfilled. And the topic has been super on my mind because there have been some important people in my life that really struggle and that I worry about, frankly, a lot in terms of isolation. And obviously that got way worse with the pandemic. But I think it was already something that's going on. And then when you think about living in a virtual reality, it becomes sort of like, oh man, is this something that's even good for us? And one area I work in a lot is climate stuff. And so anxiety is really high. And one of the main things we know about that is that connection is something that, and community is one of the main things that helps us. So in some ways, it just feels like sort of a perfect storm of a lot of things happening at the same time. And that's why this notion of hanging out is so sort of like reaffirming. And I feel like we don't always know how to do it anymore, which is this really awkward thing.
Recently, this last weekend, went back home, so to speak, the area I grew up in, San Luis Obispo County, and hung out with 2 of my girlfriends. One I've known since I was 5, and the other I've known since I was 17. And we just hung out, no major agenda. We had one dinner reservation the whole weekend, but outside of that, we really had no agenda. And to the point of this podcast, it was so refreshing to just hang out. Like, I don't do that. Everything on my calendar is like over. My poor boyfriend, my girlfriend, they all get calendar invites for things. I don't even like say like, do you want to go to this concert with me? I just send a calendar invite and they decline or accept.
Yeah, it's really not a great situation when we're sending our friends Calendly invites. That's like, that feels like something's a little off. But I really agree. Like, yeah, I sometimes I don't even know how to hang out, even with friends. I'm just like, I'm so used to everything being structured that it's like, if I don't have like a plan, it's just like, I've been so trained to like have an agenda for every meeting, have like a goal and outcome that I'm driving towards. And sometimes it's like, there is no outcome.
Yeah.
And it's almost uncomfortable sometimes, to be honest. Like, it's like, what are we doing? I don't know. Like, you sometimes forget how to, shoot the shit or whatever, So it's like, it's funny how it's like we kind of lost that, and we almost need to like make it a priority to be uncomfortable. She was a college professor, and she was talking about how most of her students, when they were like sitting in the classroom before a class started, they were just looking at their phones. And like I did lots of grad school, so like I was in college fairly recently. When I was teaching classes like not that long ago, like I thought it was normal to sit there and talk to people, and these kids are just sitting there and like not talking to anyone, and they're like in the midst of they're like 20. Like, how do you not talk to your peers when you're 20? Like, and she said that the biggest thing for them to overcome was sort of this sense of sort of like anxiety about like social awkwardness, and that was like for me, you have to have social awkwardness. That's just like a part of life.
Yeah.
So that was just like so interesting to hear. But I think it's sort of that same feeling in a sense of that like unplanned time. So I don't know if you had, if you guys like, if it felt awkward at all for you guys to just be hanging out, or if it felt really natural, but I guess you guys have known each other for a long time, but.
Yeah, it was totally natural. It was phenomenal. It was great. Like it truly, truly, truly was amazing. And I just kept going back to this podcast every time because I'm thinking about, what they were talking about there. And
I generally classify myself as like an elder millennial. I think,
yeah,
in this spec, it's like I got Facebook, like Facebook started like the first year of college for me.
Yeah.
Right. So that was like, I remember pre-social media, but I still like, yeah, so it wasn't, but so anyway, so people, I find like up until the end of like age 29, 30, like at late 20s, like it's still actually fairly, like we usually get each other. Like we actually grew up with a fairly similar technology set, but then if I go 20 years below, it's so different. And so it's really fascinating that even someone who's like, 20 to 28 or something has such a huge divide.
I think there has to be some training. I think colleges need to, really start looking at this issue of communication and, socialization. And it's okay to be awkward and not be perfect. I mean, not to get into social media too much, but if all you know is what you post or what your friends post that is an airbrushed view of the world, and you don't feel like you have that airbrushed view of your own world, that creates a lot of social anxiety.
Tons. And you've never, yeah, it's crazy to me to even realize that can be true. Because I just don't like, but I had a friend whose little brother is like 20, and he basically never goes out of the house. Like the only person he interacts with is their mom. And it's like mind blowing. Like, so it's like, and part of me is like wonders, like I feel like I must just be a thing like, oh, like I didn't grow up really with like video games, so like I don't really like, yeah, we're not a TV driven household, so like I just have a poor understanding of that. And I'm like, people say that like you can have it like connections through that, but I also see like some of these people who play a lot of video games like really struggling with other types of relationships.
Yeah.
So you just sort of wonder like, and
I'm just going to say it, like I'm scared. I truly am. As I think about the workforce, as I think about the next generation that's solving problems.
That's the scary thing about worrying about like isolation and people not feeling a part of things is the notion that like we have a lot of big problems to overcome.
Yes.
And like all humans, we won't probably overcome them in a seamless way. We're gonna stumble our way through them, and there will be a number of tragedies and comedies along the way. But we have to like see the tragedy and comedy and then sort of know that that's a ride we're on, and so we have to sort of bump along with it. And so, yes, so if you don't see yourself as a part of that, if you're sort of something external to that, it's like oh, it really undermines our ability to do cool things.
Yeah. To
Yeah,
do important things.
yeah, which is like it's very central.
And not just sit there with our iPad and staring and not talking to anybody.
Exactly. And I mean, we can all sympathize with that, right? Like I have, sometimes I look at that screen time readout on my phone. I'm just like, oh my God, like it's terrible. Terrible. Like, I'm like, how did I just spend this many hours on Instagram? Like, I know it's not good, but it's very addictive.
Yeah.
So it's like I have sympathy for it. I'm like partially just relieved that I'm not 20 right now, or not a teenager, certainly right now. I think it's more about people seeing themselves as part of a team, and like your society and your community being sort of the team that you're a part of, and realizing that like you guys are trying to do something together. And so just seeing yourself, that sort of groupthink, or that feeling of the whole is more than the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a little scared of saying something like this schedule snow, because I think it gets really politicized in that way sometimes.
It does.
And it's more for me, it's really important to say that it's more about getting that that feeling that we're all in it together.
Yes.
I think it's missing.
I think that's really the thing to underline is, I mean, again, I grew up in the 70s, quite a different mantra than the 80s and 90s, but I did grow up with a father that told me I was the best thing since sliced bread every single day of my life, like just truly, poured into me.
And that helped you, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Like I have very good self-confidence, partially because that. Yeah. But to your point, I also very much understood that I was part of something bigger, and everybody else has their own special, unique talents. And it's not about me, it's about us together. My plea to folks is get out. Join a co-working space, join a community, get involved, put yourself out there, get uncomfortable, talk to somebody you don't know and strike up a conversation, right? You joined a co-working space, our co-working space. Will you talk a little bit about what you were looking for and what you then have found in being part of Hera Hub?
Yeah, it was definitely top of mind when I was like looking for a co-working space. I didn't want one where everyone was just sort of like staring at their laptops and coding, and nothing against coding. I'm like coding as well. It's very creative, but some co-working spaces didn't seem like they had that community vibe. And so I just think that was a sense of people who are doing something that want a little bit more than just a place that's out of their house. Because I wanted to get out of my house, but why did I want to get out of my house? It wasn't just for like a separate kitchen and desk, right? Like I already had those things. And so it was really just for the opportunity to have new encounters that I didn't plan on having, right? And so there's this notion of like planned time, right? So so that's been something that I've really enjoyed about being a part of Hera Hub is it feels like there's both opportunities to have that unplanned you're planning to have just to have spontaneous things sometimes happen, but also of course you can we all need to get stuff done, so people are like very understanding of that as well, but I think that was the main thing I've been looking for. It was also really nice that people at Hera Hub had like a general entrepreneurial spirit, which was like also a slightly different flavor from co-working spaces that I feel like are just people in sort of isolation burnout. So yeah, I feel like I found all those things, and people in general are really supportive of that also.